Well, hello, and thanks for tuning in again. All right, today I'd like to do something just a little bit different. Well, actually a lot different than what I normally would do. Street photography, portrait street photography is one of those things that I do enjoy doing. I just don't do it nearly as often as I used to. The last time I took any street photography portraits of people was probably about 4 years ago, and I took a few the previous year. But unfortunately, I didn't do very much with those images. I kind of messed around with a few images and did some preliminary editing on them. But I decided to go ahead and actually process some of those images and present those to you. Now, the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to show you the original image, and then directly following that, I'm going to show you the edited image. All right, so let's get into it, and I'll show you exactly what I did. All right, here is the first image. Now, this particular image is of a homeless man. Now, where I live, when I'm on my way to work, I tend to pass by this man quite a bit. And, I felt somewhat sorry for him. I pulled over one day, and I gave him a couple of dollars so he could perhaps get some food or whatever. And, well, I had my camera in the car, so I asked him if I could actually take a couple photos of him. And he agreed. So I ended up taking about 3 or 4 shots. And this is actually the shot that I thought was the best of the 4 that I took. And what I did was I took these into Lightroom, as I normally would, and began the processing. Now, this next image is the edited image from this color image. Now, I might add that this particular outing is all black and white. So all of the color images that you're initially going to see have all been converted to black and white. And here's the first black and white conversion. And this is the edited image that I came up with. Now, in Lightroom, what I did was first, I used the adjustment brush and I blackened out the background, and did that very carefully. It took me a little bit of time, but I think it was all worth it. Now, in Lightroom, one thing I've noticed is that the detail brushes, and if you have one of the newer versions of Lightroom, the texture sliders, I should say, are invaluable for giving you a very nice look to certain types of portraits. All right, now that image was shot in direct sunlight, so I made use of the highlights that showed up on this gentleman's face, and I brought those out as much as I possibly could without actually burning out the image. So the highlights are intact, they're not blown, and see if you look right here. Now, his eyes were somewhat in the shadows, so I simply went in and increased the exposure right here on this gentleman's eye, so his eye wasn't completely blacked out. And the gentleman also had a lot of gray hair, so I used the adjustment brush and I increased the exposure on a lot of the gray hairs on his head to bring those out. And I'm satisfied with the image. I like how this turned out. And unfortunately, I haven't seen that gentleman again. I hope he's okay. But I'm grateful that he allowed me to take a few images of him. All right, let's move on to the next image. All right. Now, this lady, I was on my way to the store one day, and this lady was outside waiting for the city bus to pick her up, and she had some time before the bus came by. Now, one thing I like about photographing people, I like to photograph people, especially older people, that have, because many older people have have a very textured look to their skin that provides a lot of character. And this lady was no exception, just like the previous gentleman. And I approached her and I asked her if I could take a couple photographs of her. Now, being that she was waiting for the bus, I offered to give her some bus fare, and I gave her a couple of dollars, and she agreed. So I ended up taking about 4 photographs of this lady, and I liked the fact that she was smoking a cigarette at the time. I think all of this really adds character to the image itself. Now, as with the last image, I darkened, almost completely eliminated the background, and so that the lady was really the highlight of the image. Now, if you look at her face, you can see that the highlights are prevalent, which is what I like on a particular image like this. And I pushed it about as far as I could take it without actually blowing out the highlights. And next is the edited image of this. Now, there is one thing that you'll see. If you look here, when I took the photograph, I could see the smoke that was actually coming from the cigarette. But unfortunately, when I actually took the image, apparently the wind was blowing the smoke in another direction. So it's not actually visible here in the color image. So I had to do a little bit of Photoshop manipulation. And this is what I came up with. And as you can see, I decided not to completely darken the background. I left just a little bit of detail of the background here. Images like this, you have to kind of play them by ear, and pretty much process them the way that you're happy. There's no right or wrong way to process anything. It's just a matter of doing it to the point that you're satisfied with it. And as you can see, I was able to bring back the cigarette smoke that was elusive in the color image. All right. I used the adjustment brush, of course, to downplay the areas on the sides of her, and so it draws complete attention to this lady and her face. And as you can see, she was also in direct sunlight, which is something that I like. All right, what I did here, this t-shirt, her sweatshirt rather, was a lot brighter than it actually is here. So I darkened that so it wouldn't take too much away from her skin and the highlights that are there on her face. Now, I also used the adjustment brushes. If you'll see here, she has a lot of gray streaks going through her hair. What I did was I used the adjustment brush and I worked on the gray hairs to bring those out so that they stood out a bit more. All right, I also shaded this side of her face just a little bit to provide a bit of contrast between the highlights on one side of her face and the other side of her face. All right, and I'm also pretty happy with this. I think it has a very dramatic look, as did the first image. All right, let's move on to the next one. All right, now this image of this gentleman was taken probably about maybe 10 or 15 minutes after I took the image of the lady that we just looked at. Now, this gentleman was in the same general area, and there was something about this gentleman that struck my attention. If you look at his face, you can see the lines, the wrinkles in his face. And as I said earlier, I think this adds a lot of character to the image. And one side of his face, as you can see, is in direct sunlight. And I liked that. That actually worked to my advantage here, as did the previous 2 images. As with the previous 2, I actually completely eliminated the background here and made it completely black. And so all of the attention is drawn to the gentleman himself. Okay, if you look here, especially on the right side of his face, you can see that his eyes are glowing slightly. It's picking up the sunlight. Now, on the left side of his face, I had to increase the the brightness just a little bit in his eyes, so it wasn't completely blackened out, so you could see some detail here. All right, and let's look at the edited image. All right, and this is what I came up with. Now, as I said about having character to the faces, using the texture brush and the detail brush, it really accentuates the lines in this gentleman's face. It also brings out more texture in the man's beard. And as you can see, the right side of his face was in direct sunlight, and we've got some great highlights here. And of course, I downplayed the left side of his face a little bit by using the shader brush, and just lightening up his left eye just slightly. You know, one thing about taking images like this, you may have a certain idea of how you would like things to look, but you don't actually know what it's going to look like until it's actually processed. You know, sometimes you think you have a very good idea for something, and then once you begin processing it, it simply isn't working. Now, also, any photographer that does this type of work often knows that black and white has a certain quality that color simply can't compete with. And a lot of the time, if I shoot something in color and I'm not satisfied with the final result of the color image, I will convert it to black and white. And more often than not, the black and white image is much more pleasing than the color was. And on all of these images, that was pretty much the case, because my original intent was actually to shoot these in color. A couple of them, I felt color was, it wasn't that bad, but black and white simply took it to another level altogether. All right, and here is the final image. Okay, in 2018, so about 4 years ago, I had a chance to travel to South America, and I went to Peru. And the lady that you're looking at here was one of the shop owners on this particular street. Naturally, I couldn't resist getting some photographs of some of the people here. The look is just entirely different than what you would see here in the States. I asked this lady if I could take a photograph of her, and she agreed. And being that I'm a tourist, I gave her a few dollars as well for her trouble, because these people depend on that for their livelihood. And she was happy. She was very pleasant and allowed me to take I didn't want to get greedy, so I took one shot, and this is the one shot that I took of this lady. And this is the edited image. All right. Now, the original image was only 10 megapixels, which is actually fine for a portrait. But also the quality of the camera sensor came into play here. So what I did here was I used Topaz Gigapixel. Topaz Gigapixel has the ability to enlarge an image. So what I did here was I actually doubled the size of the actual image, and in the process it also increased the resolution. It's a rather impressive program. So if you're ever in a situation where you'd like to do some cropping in, but you have a relatively small image, and your quality will probably go down a bit more than you would like it to, you can always use Gigapixel to increase the size of the image. Then you can do your cropping. Because if I go back to the previous image, you can see that she's much further away than in this image. So basically I cropped in and brought her right in, and I essentially didn't lose any detail at all. And I didn't want to push this too much as far as the texture and the detail were concerned. I was pretty moderate with it. I didn't want the woman to look too too artificial. And I'm rather happy with this. I really like the hat. And I really did the same thing here. I used the shader brush and I darkened the right side of her face just slightly to provide some contrast. And brightened both of her eyes just slightly, because in the original image, the woman's eyes were pretty red. They looked almost bloodshot. So I lightened her eyes up a bit, and that gave her image new life altogether. All right. Well, that's about it for this video, and I hope you enjoy these images, and I hope you enjoy the process that I went through to edit them. So, as always, until next time, and if you like this video, please don't hesitate to comment, like, and please subscribe.